Okay, hello everyone, Foul Play here. We are here today doing our part 3 of my ultimate guide to Bogles, and this will be the second lot of sideboarding. So we covered part 2 in the previous video that we did. If you haven't watched it, check it out, and especially if you need or would like to see some advice or some tips on how to sideboard for those matchups. So today we'll be focusing on part 3 over here. I didn't have any suggestions in the comment section as to the 10th or 20th deck to involve, depending on which list you're looking at. So I just decided to chuck Merfolk in there. It's a staple that's been around for a long time, and although it's not super amazingly dominant, you'd expect to see a couple of copies pop up at a GP. Whether or not you verse them or not would be another matter entirely. Alright, so today we will be going over the Jund, Harden Scales, Niv Mizzet Reborn, Titan variants, Storm, Mill, the Mirror Match, Dredge, Ponza, and Merfolk. So to kick things off with Jund. This matchup used to be a lot easier before the printing of Assassin's Trophy, but since then it becomes a bit trickier. And also Plague Engineer can be very, very frustrating, which they sideboard in against us. Fortunately, at the moment, I'm running main deck Rest in Peace, so that gives me a lot of game 1 percentage against Jund, against their discard, against their sack effect from Liliana. If you're just playing around the Liliana of the Veil blowing you out, though, it's probably good to keep in mind that if your opponent turn 2 does nothing but holds up 2 open mana, that they could in fact Assassin's Trophy your leyline in your end step, and then blow up your or play Liliana, make you sack your 1 creature, and then you'll basically lose the match from there. So if you've got an open fetch land, it can be handy to save that, so you've got at least an extra turn of play. Or alternatively, if you have a second hexproof creature in hand, it could be handy to put them out there. So Plague Engineered is particularly annoying because we do actually have a decent number of auras that do not give toughness. And Plague Engineer will give -1/-1. So if our toughness goes to 0, we get sacked to state-based effects. So essentially what your opponent can do is they can blow up your Hyena Umbra or your Ethereal Armor, whatever it might be, the things that give your toughness to your creature. Then they'll play Plague Engineer, or even Plague Engineers already on the battlefield, and your creature will die to state-based effects. And as I was talking about that previous play about having a creature out for Liliana on turn 3, could be very awkward if you play 2 Bogles, and one of them has, well, both of them only have 1 toughness because one of them's enchanted with Griff Spoons and Rancors, and then they just Plague Engineer and wipe both your creatures out in one go after naming Beast. So it's post-board, it's important to look to establish 2 or more toughness, and in this matchup I also like having multiple instances of first strike when I'm attacking into a large chump blocker like a Tarmogoyf, because if they blow up 1 instance of first strike, the other one is very handy to actually mean you can still trade with the creature. Alright, so as far as the sideboards are concerned, I'm not a massive fan of Path to Exile in the matchup. They're an attrition-based deck that are trying to grind us out, but I view it a lot like Tron or Eldrazi Tron, where I just assume my creature is going to be bigger and attack in. And I know not everyone, some people might not like that strategy, but that's what I found works for me. And I found that Rest in Peace is really, really good, particularly since the printing of both Ren and 6 and Croxer. Like, they're a very reliant deck on their graveyard these days. So Rest in Peace shrinks their glyphs, it stops Scavenging Ooze from eating creatures, it stops and from growing as well, because it will grow when it does that. It doesn't just gain them life. It'll stop them from getting Croxer back, and it will stop Ren and 6 value. So it's very, very powerful card in the matchup. I do like Core Spirit Dancer because this is an attrition-based matchup, and she's a draw engine. but boarding out 1 is probably okay. You're not going to look to have it in your opening hand as the creature you go in on most of the time. So 3 is probably okay, as opposed to cutting auras, which are threat density in my opinion. So obviously keep your ley line in the ley line main list, and then when you've got your ley lines in your sideboard, you bring them in and you're just removing your suppression field and the extra copies of path. So Harden Scales, well, the deck's sort of disappeared at the moment, post companion nerfing. I am pretty sure it will pop up again at some point in some way, shape or form, whether or not a new card is printed or not, or someone just makes a small tweak to the deck, and then all of a sudden it's going to be good again. So in my opinion, I think that Suppression Field shuts the deck down better than Collector Roof or Stony Silence. My reasons are they have a lot of activated abilities on their lands, and I don't know, it just seems to mess with their math a lot. I find because they have a lot of modular triggers, they're a little bit resilient to Stony Silence and Collector Roof types effects, where it doesn't sound like a lot, but it interacts with their land base and it hurts them quite significantly. I've done a very bad job of explaining this at the moment, but yeah, that's just how I feel about the whole matchup. I might just move my face over here. I didn't realize I was taking up that on the recording. So yeah, as I said before, they can generate a fair few chump blockers through Hangerback Walker. If they have the whole Lurus variant, they can get Hangerback Walker from the graveyard, and then they'll have like flying chump blockers for days, and that's not a whole lot of fun. Fortunately, the companion nerf did take effect. And yeah, they've got lots of good lots of their mechanics enter the battlefield or death triggers, other than the activated abilities on Hangerback Walker or Walking Ballista. You've got the likes of Steel Overseer and Arcbound Ravager. So personally, I don't think Torpor Orb is really going to do anything. They don't really have that many enter the battlefield. Actually, no, that Torpor Orb should interfere with the Harden Scales tokens, but it's not going to affect the modular, or it's not going to affect the amount of like if someone pays 4 mana to have a 2/2 Walking Ballista, it's still going to come in as a 2/2 Walking Ballista. Alright, but if you have Hushbringer, that card seems pretty good to me because it stops dying effects. Alternatively, I didn't list it here, but you can bring in Graveyard Hate against these decks, because I think it interrupts, maybe not. I need to double check whether or not that interrupts the modular trigger. Okay, so thanks to the magic of Google, I've just checked the judge ruling on it. So if you have something like Rest in Peace, the creature won't ever hit the graveyard, hence the modular trigger won't actually happen. So that's something handy to keep into account. If you have dead sideboard slots or dead main deck slots, which you're siding out into sideboard slots. And I did not load up a picture there. Let me fix that. Alright, I'm really sorry about that. I'd literally done the entire thing apart from that one slide there. Alright, so sideboarding wise, it's probably going to be a little bit dependent on what the actual variant is revolving around. Like I see a world where Rest in Peace is good, and you might want copies of Rest in Peace over Path to Exile, for example. So in my main deck leyline list, I'm looking to potentially bring in my 2 paths to take it up to 4 here, where if individual creature removal is less important, depending on what the build consists of, I might replace those with Rest in Peace instead, for example, or Hushbringers, as I was talking about before. But you definitely don't want leyline. I feel like you can trim 1 to 2 cores reasonably, and maybe one Griff Spoon out of the 2 Griff Spoon. Flying's not as good when they get lots of chump blockers in the form of the Thopter tokens off their Hangerback Walker. So I'd lean more towards Spirit Mantle or Rancor being your way to push damage through. And yeah, over here, and yeah, I'm also looking to bring in my Force of Vigors. They can hit the Harden Scales and the creatures. My Collector Roof, which is a creature that actively stuffs their game plan. I'd say Oof is probably more powerful than Stony Silence here, although if they have something like Fatal Push or Assassin's Trophy, it's also going to be that little bit more vulnerable. Although, yeah. More so for the Fatal Push than the Assassin's Trophy. Okay, and then the Suppression Fields, I talked about them before, how good I think they are. And yeah, some path. So the sideboard thing is an exact mirror of that. You have the same number of cards in your deck, just the other way around. Alright, so Niv Mizzet Reborn. Personally, I hate this matchup. I don't enjoy it because normally you sit there thinking it's a 3 or 4 color control deck, and then it's not until turn 3 when they cast a Kaya's Guile and makes you sack a creature, or a Teferi and bounce your core Spirit Dancer, and you're like, shit, this is Niv Mizzet, I'm gonna lose. So, like, they get the game 1 advantage because it's unexpected, unless you see something like a Reflecting Pool in their mana base, or that land that can tap for any color but only for multicolored spells. Unless you see one of those definite lands, it's hard to tell they're actually on it. And yeah, even if you do put 2 creatures down to play around the Kaya's Guile, I have seen decks main decking the Deafening Clarion, which is a 3 damage board sweeper for red, white, and 1 generic, so for 3 mana. And they also, I've seen Firespout in sideboard lists as well, which essentially does the same thing. Okay. Another issue with the matchup is if you stumble on applying pressure for like a single turn, you're often in a lot of trouble and just don't have enough to push through the damage and get the win. I like Torporob in this matchup because it stops the ETB from Niv Mizzet, and that's the way they refuel their entire hand with like 7 cards or something ridiculous. And a lot of these Niv Mizzet decks will also run Bring to Light, and Gaddock Teague will stop them from casting Bring to Light. To make matters worse, they also play some number of Thoughtseers or Inquisition of Kozilek in the sideboard, or at least some lists do. I don't really fancy playing Leyline with the other stuff we need in this matchup, but maybe it's correct on the draw. Alright, so I'm looking to take out my Leylines and potentially a Path or a Core Spirit Dancer. Remember, in this list I only have 2 Path in the main deck, so potentially going down to 1 Path. I'm probably leaning more towards removing the Core Spirit Dancer. Bringing in my Torporobs and my Gaddock Teagues, and then with my Leyline in the sideboard list, I'm going to be removing the Suppression Fields and 2 Path, and then potentially removing another Path or a Core Spirit Dancer, same here, bringing in my Orbs and my Gaddock Teague. Alright, so Titan decks. So I really don't like how much love Titan decks have been given recently. It's just made them way too more powerful in my opinion. Since the printing of Castle Garenbrig and Dryad of Lycian Grove, like, why should they get a 5 mana Titan when all their land taps for 2 mana anyway? It's just not fair. But yeah, they're good draws, which happen a lot more these days. I think they're just overall more consistent and more consistently quick. Like, to think they banned Summer Bloom because they wanted to stop people from getting Hive Mind to lose, and then they print all this stuff into it. It's just, it blows my mind. It really does. So the important thing to note with this matchup is your Force of Vigor will hit both the Amulet of Vigor and the Dryad of Elysian Grove. The Dryad of Elysian Grove is an enchantment creature, so you can do a nice little clean 2 for 1, or you can take out 2 Dryads at once. You should note that if they're doing Dryad triggers, you can wait until their Valacult triggers are on the stack and targeting you in the face. And in response to those triggers, you can then cast your Force of Vigor, destroying the Dryad, at which point they won't have the mountains and it will fizzle the damage from the Valacults. Also, interesting note, Valacult is colorless damage. Like, lands don't have color, apart from manlands like Dryad Arbor, or when you activate some of the other ones, the creature lands, then they get assigned a color, but they never have a color. So if you have something like Protection from Red, like on Master of Waves, or Burrington Forge Tender, or whatever it might be, it's not going to stop the Valacult damage. You can't really get around that, other than having Hexproof or something, I suppose. So any creature removal here is also good. Having access to evasion is good because they can go wide with zombie tokens or Field of the Dead, which is one of their lands, and chump block you forever. They also have either Engineered Explosives, which is more common, or Blast Zone in the main deck, which they can get with Talaria West or off of a Titan trigger, so just be aware of that. Make sure you have Totem Armor down on the appropriate turn, and that you don't overinvest into a board state when you're going to get blown up. If you're playing against the Scape Shift variant, it will be easier to tell. They'll play mana ramp like Explore and Sakatu Tribe Elder. Then you'll know they'll have Scape Shift. It's a 4 mana sorcery spell that makes them sack all their land and search the library for new land. The land enters and the Valacult triggers will go on the stack and hit you in the face. I think the magic number's 7 for that. They need to be at 7 land before they can do that, but they can pretty easily do that by turn like 4 or something, I'm pretty sure. Gaddock will actually stop this deck from casting Scape Shift, so it's a good card to board in against that variant. It's not going to be in the sideboard I show you because it's not good against the Titan versions of Scape Shift or Valacult damage. I just wanted to include that in there anyway. So Leyline can be handy game 1, but I like taking it out in game 2 because they bring in enchantment destruction. Alternatively, they can just beat you by going wide with zombie tokens, and your Leylines are sort of a dead card. I like bringing in my Force of Vigors because they hit the Amulet and the Dryad, and the Path hit Dryad and Titan. And that will take me up to 4 Path in the main deck. Lots of removal on their business cards there. And then with the other deck list, I'm just removing the suppression fields, bringing in the Force of Vigor. I've already got 4 Path in the main deck of that list. Alright, so Storm. Difficult matchup for us, in my opinion. If your opponent concedes game 1 to Leyline, it's either Storm or Burn, but in my experience, it's normally Storm, and they don't want to give you the information. Burn players like to try and play it out, I've noticed. So I used to do this thing where I'd board out my Leylines because they could bounce them, and I'd board in all my creature removal so that I could destroy their creatures, and my Graveyard Hate. Obviously Graveyard Hate's good here. But I'd board in creature removal, which is normally Path, and that's only good for a turn, and it's really awkward because the Storm player will be playing cards like Remand normally, or is it Unsubstantiate, return a spell or a creature to its owner's hand. And yeah, so like you need to end of your turn 3, if you're on the play, they've played a turn 2 creature, right? You can't let them untap because they could counter your Path, and then you're just stuffed. So you need to ramp them to 3 mana to do that, in which case, like, it just doesn't work. It defeats the purpose because they don't even need the creature to go off. Once they get like 3 to 4 mana on the board, they're just like ritual, bam, 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 you lose. So long story short, Graveyard Hate, Gaddock is good, and keep your Leylines in so that their grape shots can't hit you in the face. It'll slow down their gameplay a lot because then they need to bounce that before they can grape shot you, and it just makes the whole thing a lot more complicated for them. Gaddock is also good because it stops cards like Repeal, Gifts Ungiven, as I was saying before. Damping Sphere and Deafening Silence are good cards to board in this matchup. If they are part of your sideboard, they're not part of mine. Not currently. I've been thinking about removing one of the Gadok Teagues for a Damping Sphere, just because like it's still good against Tron, it's still good against Storm, but like Gadok Teague's legendary, so it was just a thought. I don't know if I like it or not yet. Alright, so against Storm, I've looked to take out my core Spirit Dancers here. Maybe you can leave a couple in. I couldn't see any other good board outs. And removing my removal like my paths. So I've already got Leyline in the main deck here. Bringing in my Rest in Peace, my Gadok Teague. So between all those cards, that's 10 hate cards. It's not a bad number. Maybe you could shave on some Griff Spoons or or something else, or a land instead of Core Spirit Dancer. Particularly if you're on the draw, maybe you could shave a land. So when you've got Leyline in the sideboard, so we're going to be bringing in those 10 cards, the Leylines, the Rest in Peace, and the Gadok Teague. We're going to be taking out the Core, the Path, and the Suppression field. Moving on to Mill. Alright, so this matchup's normally pretty easy. You can lose. The awkward thing... Yeah, normally, like... It's a real newbie deck sort of thing. Like, the people that play it would just concede the fact that Leyline just beats them and they won't play around it, or they won't expect it, or they won't try to play around it. But it can actually be a very scary deck because they've got some very powerful cards that have been added into them for like the last however many sets. Alright, so it can be scary if they have one of their fast hands. Leyline completely shuts them down. So I've got this little note here: avoid fetching where possible as Archive Tripe. If I search my library, they can cast that in response, and then that will make you mill 13. Or if you are fetching, or you do need to fetch, do it on like the first turn before they have opportunities to draw Archive Trap. And just try to not take all that free milling, because it doesn't cost them mana, and that's pretty important. So other things to be aware of are that they are blue-black, so they'll have discard like Thoughtseers and Inquisition. They also have a Mesmeric Orb, which makes you untap. It's an artifact, makes you untap. Every time you untap, you mill a card. Same for your opponent though, it's not one way, it's both ways. Ensnaring Bridge, we all know and hate that card. Things like Damnation or Bontus and Engineered Explosives. So they actually have a pretty scary sideboard suite between the explosives all the way up to the Ensnaring Bridge there. So here, I don't really care about their creatures that much. So I'm removing Path, removing a Core Spirit Dancer. I'm definitely looking to bring in my Force of Vigors and Collector Roof, maybe my Suppression fields. Excuse me. No, back. So yeah, you want to make sure you don't just lose to a random Ensnaring Bridge here. And killing him as Merfolk Orb while you're at it, like, why not? Damnation and Explosives, so obviously Totem Armor Hands are good. We're going to be keeping our Leylines in, by the way. They're really, really powerful. I put Suppression Field as a maybe in, mostly because Explosives and Fetch lands in their arsenal. They don't have that many of either, so I don't think it's right, but maybe there's a variant or a build where it might be more correct than what it is for me. So obviously just boarding out that removal, doing an efficiency swap creature-wise here, and just hedging ourselves against a bit of their hate. Collector Roof also having the added benefit of being green and being able to pitch to Force of Vigor. So in the other list, we'll be removing the Path, a Core Spirit Dancer, and a Spirit Mantle. We'll be bringing in our Leylines, our 2 Force, and our Collector Roof, and maybe a Suppression Field comes out as well, or maybe just the second Spirit Mantle. Alright, so the mirror match. I'd like to say there's a massive, fantastic trick to winning this matchup. I did do a nice play with Force of Vigor the other week. Back when Luris was pre-nerfed, actually, which almost got me back into the game, and then they got the Core Spirit Dancer and drew better from that point of view. And I didn't have any enchantments in my graveyard to return, so even when I did see a core Spirit Dancer, I couldn't do anything with it. It was very sad. Alright, so a lot of the times it's just going to be the luck of the draw, who top decks better, who has the better opening hand. It's pretty uninteractive, the matchup, at least pre-board. Probably the most important thing to recognize and realize is, do you need to go in on Boggle, or do you need to go in core? And the points where you go in on core is where they're really, really far ahead on the Boggle, and you're just like, alright, if they got the path, they've got it. If not, I'm not going to grow my Boggle bigger than their like triple ethereal armor one with a Rancor and a Daybreak. Like, it's just not going to happen. That's huge. So that's sort of the circumstance where you go in on a core. Okay. Oh yeah, and Flood. I hate Flood. Go away. So post board, we're going to be looking to remove cards like Leyline and Sunpath. And it seems it's sort of my technology. I'm still not that big, so I assume like lots of people that I've versed online are running different lists to me. So a lot of people might not be running Suppression Field. And a lot of decks actually run more than the 5 fetch lands than what I've got. They run 6 or 7. So if you're on the play, you might actually be able to catch them out with a Suppression Field, because they're going to lead on something like Razorverge Thicket or first, or Temple Garden first, and then their fetch land is going to get the basic, and you might be able to catch them out with it. I don't think it's it's definitely not good on the draw. You might get them on the play with it, if you've got a dead card. Alright, so you definitely want some number of answers for core Spirit Dancer. 4 seems excessive. I think it's somewhere between 2 or 3. And it also depends on how many other cards you have to bring in, like your Force of Vigors or something. Obviously, if you have Enchantment Hate, run it. In my opinion, Force of Vigor and Ray of Revelation are going to be the best Enchantment Hate to destroy, because for 1 card, it kills 2 enchantments. That's as simple as it gets. Seal of Primordium, Nature's Claim, Natural State, Unravel the Ether, all of them, they just go 1 for 1 for enchantments. These 2 go 2 for 1. Alright, so your board outs are going to be your Ley Lines. Your board ins are going to be your Force of Vigors. Okay, so this is why I've included Suppression Field here. Because do I want 4 path in the deck to take out 4 core Spirit Dancers? Maybe, maybe not, probably not. I think we identified before. I'm looking at 2 to 3. So if you're on the play, maybe muck around with a Suppression Field or 2. On the draw, just go all 4 path. At least with this current list. If you're running 3 Force of Vigors, which I think I prefer, then you'd have an extra card slot here, and then you'd only have 1 slot for either a 3rd path or a 1 of Suppression Field. So Leyline's already in the sideboard in this other list, so we're going to be looking to take out Suppression Field or path and bring in our Force of Vigor. Okay, so Dredge. Yeah, this is a pretty good matchup. Usually favored if we have Daybreak, sometimes favored if we have Sentinel's Eyes. Usually quick hands that apply lots of damage are good, and if you have something with Vigilance that lets you chump block and Rancor that lets you push damage through, be really good. Graveyard Hate is very good for us to bring in 2 of them, obviously post board. Also be aware they have main deck Blast Zone, which they can get back from their graveyard with Life from the Loam, and that's really, really irritating. And post board they will have Nature's Claim and Thoughtseize. So I normally always bring out my Ley Lines against Dredge, although they board in Thoughtseize. They only board in like 2 Thoughtseize, so maybe 3 at the most, and it's like, are they gonna have it? And normally you win game 1, and you're just like, I don't know. I'm not convinced. Normally I'm keeping a hand because it has like 3 good aspects to it in this matchup. It, like post board, it either has Graveyard Hate or it has Daybreak Coronet. And yeah, like, I don't know. I hate 1-for-1 removal against Dredge, so I'm going to be taking out all copies of Path that I can. Bring in the Rest in Peace, bring in the Torpor Orb as well, they're really good. So Torpor Orb is like a pseudo Rest in Peace in this matchup. So if a Narco Amoeba or a Bloodghast enters the battlefield from the graveyard, it won't trigger their prized amalgam, which is pretty cool. And yeah, and Suppression Field, obviously. Why am I bringing in one Suppression Field there? That doesn't seem right. I guess I just had dead cards. Give me a sec. Okay, it looks like I just had a dead slot. I think Suppression Field's probably situational there. It will shut down things like their fetch lands. They do have lots of fetch lands. Also their Shriekhorn. It's probably better on the play than what it is on the draw. Maybe a Path to Exile wouldn't be bad for like taking out their Ox or a prized amalgam or something. So maybe Suppression Field on the play and a Path on the draw there. Yeah. Alternatively, if you don't like the Torpor Orb idea, you could just leave in 3 ley lines and just bring in the 3 Rest in Peace, and like that's not horrible. It's not too bad. So yeah, over on the other side, just looking to remove my Path and a Suppression Field, or maybe 2 Suppression Field, 3 Path, bringing in the Torpor Orb and the Rest in Peace. Alright, so Ponza. This is a nice tricky matchup. So normally they have 3 mana by turn 2, and you have no idea what's in their hand. And are they going to play the Blood Moon effect or the Magus of the Moon effect, or are they going to play the Pillage effect? Who knows? They also run some lists run Blood Moon, other lists run Magus of the Moon, and some will run a combination of both. So sideboarding against them can be tricky if you haven't seen which moon effect they've got in game 1. Can make it tricky. Yeah, so at 3 mana they represent multiple things. So in this matchup, I really like cards like Suppression Field and Savage Swipe. Path and Force of Vigor are also pretty good, but your primary cards, if you're seeing a lot of this deck in your metagame, are Suppression Field and Savage Swipe. They've got lots of fetch lands. Dried Arbor untapping a land is an activated ability. Turn 2 Suppression Field wrecks this deck like 95% of the time, if not more. Savage Swipe is also really good. Obviously, all your fetch lands search for basic forest, and it gives you a way to Savage Swipe your opponent's creature, which is a Magus of the Moon, and kill their creature without giving them extra land and ramping them. And also you get an attack for 4, which is pretty good too. And yeah, just interestingly enough, I was playing some games off camera a little while ago, and I actually won a game. I was on the play against Ponza, and I had 2 fetch lands, a Core Spirit Dancer, an extra land. So I had three lands in hand, 2 of which were fetch lands. I had a Core Spirit Dancer, and then I had like a Hyena Umbra and a what do you call it? Sentinel's Eyes. So I was sitting there and I was like, I can actually keep this. So all I did was do turn 1 land, fetch land, don't crack it. Turn 2 fetch land, don't crack it. Hold both of them up. So I pass from my turn 2, it goes to my opponent's turn 2. He's sitting there trying to do his 3 mana move. What's he going to do? Blood Moon? I'm going to search 2 basics in response. It's going to be 2 basic planes. I'm going to get my Core Spirit Dancer out. I'm going to get a Totem Armor effect on her. And then I'm going to be able to play my Sentinel's Eyes the turn after that. And they'll be shut off from that point. And I'll just smack them in the face. Or if they play... Yeah, so... And they can't pillage me because I've got fetch lands. And I'll just sacrifice it in response. And yeah. So I just held that up. And it was a very, very satisfying win. And it was very bizarre. So that's why I thought I'd share it with you guys. Because that's not normally how the matchup plays out. But it was very interesting to see that scenario unfold and to get a win that way. Alright. So taking out our ley lines, a core Spirit Dancer, they do die to Savage Swamp and a Grisboon. You could take out 2 core Spirit Dancers and leave the extra Griffin in there. We're going to be looking to bring in Force of Vigors because they hit Blood Moon, they hit... what's the enchantment they put on their land? That's the one, Utopia Sprawl. So they'll either hit their Moon effect or, you know, your opponent goes... if your opponent plays a Utopia Sprawl on their land, sometimes what they'll do is they'll do like a turn 1 Arbor Elf, a turn 2 Utopia Sprawl, untap the land, and then they can generate 4 mana in the second turn that way. So in response to the untap effect, you just blow up the Utopia Sprawl, and then they just sit there going, oh crap, I only have access to 2 mana now instead. Or 3 mana? Maybe I haven't done that math right. There was a situation like that worked. Alright. Not important. There's stages to play around. So obviously I don't have Savage Swipe in this list, so we're bringing in the Paths instead. If you know they're running Blood Moon instead of Magus of the Moon, the Paths probably don't do anything and you won't need them. So Leyline's in the sideboard, just looking to remove a core Spirit Dancer or 2, and potentially a Grisboon if you don't want to remove 2 core Spirit Dancers. Bringing in the Force of Vigors. Alright, so the last matchup we're going to be covering for today, Merfolk. One of the streamers or YouTubers I watch, Nikachu, very good at Merfolk, very entertaining to watch, good content. Check him out if you haven't. But yeah, he's a big fan of Merfolk, and he makes the deck do well, and I draw a decent amount of inspiration from him for my channel, just basically because he's taking a nothing deck and doing well with it. So yeah, with this matchup, we're mostly favoured here as long as we don't stumble for a turn or 2 on our land drops. Daybreak Coronet is really, really strong in the matchup, obviously, but so is Vigilance and Evasiveness. So obviously all their creatures are on the ground. They don't even run Kira, the Glass Spinner or whatever she's called anymore. So they don't have a single flying creature. Oh, they have Brazen Borrower actually. Yeah, which if they're playing at main deck, normally it's like a 2 of at the most. Maybe potentially 3. But yeah. Okay, so they do have decent interaction for us in the form of Force of Negation, Brazen Borrower, and Spreading Seas. So Spreading Seas will attack your land and turn you off double white. Brazen Borrower will do combat tricks and bounce your enchantments during combat, which means you have to be careful with your blocks and your attacks in case your creature gets shrunk and you die. And Force of Negation will just counter mostly just Daybreak Coronet. So it's important to play around these things and take them into account into your gameplay and your decision making to not get blown out. So pretty simple sideboarding really for us. We're going to look to take out Ley Lines, and we're going to look to bring in Path to Exiles and Force of Vigors. Force of Vigors aren't great, but we don't have a huge amount for our opponent. And if we shut down their Aether Vial, it's really good. This can also hit Mutavault, which is pretty good. And it's like, as far as the list that I'm sporting at the moment, it's like, do you want the Force of Vigors or do you want the Suppression Fields? And Suppression Field does exactly the same thing as Force of Vigor. It just attacks Aether Vial, but they're not going to be fetching that much. They're going to be fetching about as much as us, if not less. If they're running Simic, they run like 3 fetch lands or something, so they'll probably be fetching less than us. And yeah, outside of that, Graveyard Hate's not going to do much against them. You could consider something like Torpor or Hushbringer, because it does interact with their Merfolk Trickster, which will tap down a creature. They could use that to combat trick your core Spirit Dancer, and shrink it down small enough so that when it's blocked it dies because it's only like a 1/3 or something. If there's a core Spirit Dancer with, you know, 1 enchantment on it, 1 Hyena Umbra for example. So something to take into account. Alright, so that is going to be it for today's video, guys. I really do hope you enjoyed it and enjoyed the series. I might look at doing something again similar when the deck list changes a fair bit, but at the moment I don't like, there's not enough substance for me to change the deck list, or the sideboarding sort of stuff. Not until my deck list changes enough that it's not just me reorganizing cards and all of that. I might do like an updated metagame thing or something. Like if a new deck comes in, I might continue to do updated videos of like, hey, this is how I'm looking at sideboarding against it. This is what their deck's doing. That sort of stuff. But yeah, obviously the series took a little bit of work. I really do hope you guys enjoyed it and got something out of it. Because yeah, I'm mostly doing this to help all of you. I didn't really get too much out of doing this myself. As far as like, I already know how to sideboard for them, or I can work it out pretty easily on the spot, but obviously a lot of new people play this deck, so hopefully this helps you guys out and helps answer some of your questions. As always, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and a comment down below. Both are good for the YouTube algorithms and will help grow the channel. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe for daily content. Ring the bell if you'd like notifications. And if you haven't seen my other ultimate guides and you enjoyed this one, make sure you check out the other ones. I might add them in the description or something. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.